You know what's good in the morning? Dragon meat. I know. Hear me out. Looks like shit. Tastes fucking amazing. Welcome to the Homebrew Review. My name is Ethan, and today we're talking about the Dragila shifter. So I'm going to start this whole episode off by stating I have no attachment to this series this class was based off. And maybe a little bit harsh. As I was the last episode, I said that the Kamen Rider class was dear to me because of the show. In this case, nothing. There's no attachment here whatsoever. So, please bear with me if I'm a little harsh. I know what's on my script isn't as harsh as I think, but it may come out a little bit more harsh than, last class. But let's get into where the Dragila shifter comes from. Based off the Cygames mobile game, Dragila Lost. And it's a gacha game. The whole premise is that the 7th prince goes off to save the day because the magical MacGuffin isn't working. The main piece of information is that royalty can transform into dragons, which is what the Dragila shifter is. I know within the story, the 7th prince doesn't actually transform into a dragon, because he doesn't make a pact with the dragon, which that piece of information alone is going to come up later on in my review. Hooray, we found what it means to be a Dragila shifter. I want to say though, as transformations gimmicks go, this is the most unique, in my opinion. And from experience as well. It's also really well thought out. I personally have seen, while point systems are new, using them as cost for transformation, then using the rest for maintenance or extra health, is something pretty unique for Dungeons & Dragons. Because, let's be fair, every time you transform into something in all these different classes, they never use a point system, and that kind of makes why some classes are like, oh, I can transform into this big thing. That's immediately unbalanced, but again, the point system here is, and I'll get more into it, is something that actually is very good. And this also means that points aren't just waiting around the next time you use them. You can actually utilize the rest of the points to do other things outside of maintenance or transforming. And it also has this kind of unique own way of balancing because, as the class says, unless you can maintain the form using other points, you only get the dragon form for a turn. So it has this kind of own little balancy. You can have, so if you go for the bigger dragons, you can only last from the turn. So you put all the damage on board, but you lose consistency. So by that logic, you won't be able to repeatedly spam big ass dragons, and I'm gonna get more into this later on. But you can also have some of the smaller dragons, but have it last way longer and be more consistent. Honestly, I like to sit in between, because I like my damage output, but I also like my consistency as well. It's like why in Yu-Gi-Oh!, as an example, you can have boards of smaller monsters with low attack values, but they can deal more damage over time, because the deck is consistent. Just nice little throwaway. It also makes it really easy to adapt to different situations. Say you have lots of little enemies. You can choose to go to the bigger dragon and wipe them all out in one shot and recover points, because you can recover points in dragon form if you kill an enemy. I just want to say that now. It's an important detail to this whole mechanic. So then you'll be regaining all those little health points back through killing those enemies. But if it's a bigger enemy, you can choose to be smaller and last longer. Do a little bit more damage than your base form, but have it last longer, that it's going to give you some nice resistances. I'm going to go in a little bit more detail on how the dragon form works. So, when you transform into the dragon form, you get the dragon's health, attacks, how they attack, so like if they can do 2 claws and a bite, you can do that as well. You have access to their resistances and their stats. Which sounds really overpowered, but like as I said before, if you choose bigger and stronger dragons, you only get them for a turn. There's an exception to this rule, and I'll get to that. But it has that nice little balancing to it. Now for the most confusing part of this class. To determine which dragon you turn into, you spend mana points, that's the points that this system calls it, equal to the challenge class of the dragon. Which sounds simple, you're right. This isn't the thing that confuses me. It's actually if this is broken or not. Because unless you have spare points, the form only lasts for a turn, like I mentioned before. Meaning if you go into bigger forms, you can't be in dragon form for long. It's kind of weird, because I'll tell you the maximum points you get for this class are 20. Ignoring the 20th level ability, which I'll get to that. So you can turn into some pretty powerful dragons. And as we know, monster damage and health and blah blah is an exponential growth rather than a player's, which is a linear growth. Here's where I'm confused, is because even if you get it for just a turn, does that make it broken? When you do recover those hit point, those mana points, you probably want to de-transform anyway. So, and it's not guaranteed that you'll get 100% of the points you used back either, which is where it gets confusing. But it's also a form of balancing in itself. My confusion is like, even letting them have a turn of that form, is that too strong? Because as I said before, exponential growth and linear growth doesn't quite match. I would normally test this stuff when I think about it. But the people I talked to about this class, because I did talk to some other people about it, because, again, this really confuses me, and I've some pretty good experience, and as you know, I haven't been stumped on anything up to this point. And a lot of them just turn around and just say they won't risk it. Which is interesting, I've got to say. Like, they themselves are confused as well. But they also don't want to risk playing a game with it. So it's kind of hard to balance. Because you can't really know until you play it. And now I'm going to talk about the 20th ability, which changes my opinion slightly. The level 20th ability lets you transform for half the cost, which means you now have access to some of the bigger dragons at 20th level. But also, 20th level abilities are generally pretty fucking broken anyway, and let's be fair, not a lot of people play at the higher levels, but even then, it's a little bit broken. That there is a bit broken, because I know some of the dragons you can transform into that are really strong, and you can stay at them because of the whole half cost thing. Outside of that, the base transformation seems to be sort of iffy. And because of this, I would say only use challenge class 1 to 10 dragonoids. I know, there aren't a lot of dragonoids within that range. This is where it's up to the DM to homebrew more in. Even I would agree to homebrew more in for this class, because, let's be fair, I just don't want to risk them going over that mark. And this means that you should include homebrew that exists, well, homebrew dragonoids that exist outside of this class. So I would, it's just to flesh it out more out, because like, we want to keep the player choice, because if we just take away the player choice, what's the point? I see this mechanic being very well made. And it's something that I want to stress, is that despite all of its possible balancing issues, this mechanic is very great. And honestly, it's suited to more diverse ranges of creatures. For example, demons and devils are a great example, because they have almost a creature from challenge class 1 to 10. And you can easily balance that, because as soon as they go to a level one that's level 11 or something, you can just say, nah, don't do that ever again. Like, it's easier to see with them. With the dragons, it's not as much, because, again, there is a big gap of what you can use as well. And you don't even get your transformation abilities till level 2. I mean, it's still relatively early on, but there's not a lot of dragonoids you can choose from at level 2 or anything like that, so it's like, is it balanced? Is it broken? It's kind of hard to tell, because of how the actual mechanic works. Because the mechanic is very nicely fleshed out, as I said earlier, because it does have its own form of balancing. It still doesn't excuse some of the stuff that might occur. And so for that reason, I would say make your own dragons, keep it within challenge class 1 to 10. Summonable creatures that the players can have access to generally cap at level 10. This including magic items that let you summon things. For example, that water bowl thing that lets you summon a water elemental. Water elementals sit within 10 anyway, unless they're the primal water elements, because primal water elements are fucking weird and cool, though. What are some other options to play this class, though? I would turn this into a Warlock subclass. I know Warlocks have a lot of subclasses and generally very good, but this fits a Warlock class really well, if you want to subclass it. And it's not much you have to take away from Dragila Shifter to give it to the Warlock either, because most of the other abilities are generally not for the transformation, and if they are, a lot of them you can just skip over anyway. And especially with the thing about the lore, is that the lore is they made a pact with a dragon. For some reason only royalties can do it, I don't know why, but they make a pact with a dragon, which in itself sounds like a Warlock class. As for the lore, how close this thing is to the lore, it's very close to the lore. I'm not gonna lie. Because in lore, as far as I can tell, because I didn't do a whole lot of research, I did a little bit of research about the Dragila Lost games and stuff. But, as far as I'm aware, the main thing that makes the Royals dangerous is the dragon form. Most of them have average or adequate combat skills, which seems to reflect very well in the class, to a T. It might be a little too close for comfort, but it's there. Which I'm going to get into actually how I score it. I scored a 7 out of 10. It's very well thought out. It's at least has some thought about balancing, and I'm only keeping the 3 away from it because of my own human error of not knowing whether it is unbalanced or not. And for that reason, it means that if I am wrong, it's a 10 out of 10. Because this class is very well thought out, and I have very little issues with it outside of the possible balancing issues. 20th ability, I'll say, is an issue on its own, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because by that point, you're kind of fighting things really high level anyway, that it doesn't matter at that point. So that's it for the Dragila Shifter. Please leave a comment down below suggesting a new class, and bring out your thoughts about this one. I actually want a discussion. I know a lot of people won't probably do it because I am a very fairly unknown YouTuber, but I want discussion down there below, because let's be fair, it is really confusing. And I mean, let's be fair, I can see either way being correct in the end. I just want a little bit more interaction with my community, and also, well, the community. And I also kind of want to see what other people's thoughts are, because, again, this is a confusing topic for the people I know, and I want to see if any of you have some thoughts about it. So please leave those down in the comments. And if you like, subscribe. I'm not going to force you to. I don't really need subscribers, because I'm doing this for fun. But that is all for today. And thank you very much.